I'd like to share an update of my World War II model airplane collection. It's 1/48 scale. I'm going to talk about the unique way this collection is displayed, about making custom decals, and the seemingly often overlooked significance of World War II aircraft markings. Most of these models were put together in the 1990s, so they're over 25 years old. This is a BF-109E4 from a Hasegawa kit. It models one of the aircraft flown by Adolf Galland, Commodore of JG-26, as indicated by the markings on the side of the aircraft. The victory markings on the rudder date the aircraft to September of 1940. For the pilots who used them, the tail victory symbols varied quite a bit. Sometimes black or red rectangles with an optional roundel, or later a red or blue star for Soviet and US victories. There's video of Galland flying one of his 109E4s, and I copied the Geschwader emblem and Galland's personal Mickey Mouse emblem from that video, plus the Geschwader Commodore markings. I used GIMP to flatten and resize the images for 1/48 scale. The GIMP decals were exported from the tool and printed on waterslide paper. It's convenient for aircraft recognition that Geschwader emblems were present on nearly all, if not all, of the German fighters in 1940. In 1939, German aircraft sported a dark green, medium green camouflage. Early in 1940, the dark green was replaced with gray, and the pale blue underneath the fighters was extended up the sides to the cockpit and higher. The pale blue fuselage camouflage made the aircraft more visible over sea and enemy territory, so somewhere in 1940, JG-26 became one of the first Geschwaders to apply a dark mottled paint over the pale blue sides. I think the shade of yellow varied from pale yellow to orange yellow. For easier recognition during battle, JG-26 and other channel-based Geschwaders started painting yellow or white on their aircraft, beginning with the tips of the wings and rudders, then the entire rudder, and eventually the entire fuselage cowl. Later in 1941, yellow fuselage bands and wingtips were used for ID on the Eastern Front. White fuselage bands and wingtips were used in the Mediterranean theater from 1941 to 1943. By 1943, yellow on the cowls was reduced to just the chin area for aircraft based on the channel front, and the yellow rudders were retained. Later in 1944 and 45, Defense of the Reich bands were used for Geschwader ID. During the Middle War years, Geschwader identification was much harder to determine. Yellow under the chin and a yellow rudder might indicate one of the three Geschwaders based near the English Channel. Gruppe and Staffel ID is easier due to the always present symbols on German fighter aircraft. Here's a photo of one of my aircraft taken outside. I used GIMP to superimpose a model on the background, and to add extra aircraft to a scene, to add spinning propellers, to blur the model's propeller if it has one, and to move landing gear and flaps. Here's a BF-110C4 from a Fujimi kit. When I first painted this model in 1995, I wanted to make it an EGR-210 aircraft. EGR-210 was an experimental group using bomb racks for the first time, and it was active around August of 1940. But I didn't have any photos of an EGR-210 aircraft, so I assumed a dark two-tone green early war camouflage. Subsequently, I found photos of a crashed aircraft that landed in London, and it was camouflaged with lighter gray colors. Here are photos of the crashed aircraft. The Gruppe emblem I did originally was England viewed through a bomb sight with a shield border. However, I found out later that that emblem wasn't used until later in the war. I made the original decal using Adobe Illustrator and printed two of them in color on regular paper, then glued the paper emblems to the model. Decals made that way were thicker than desired, and resolution was poor due to the printers in the mid-90s. So I made new Geschwader emblem decals with GIMP and printed them on a white decal sheet to get the brighter yellow color and the red colors. It was challenging to get the lighter yellow and red colors with ideally a clear center area. So I compromised and used a white decal sheet, trying to color the center area a pale blue that would match the model color. I also replaced most of the insignia using a white decal sheet underneath a clear decal sheet, as it required less precise cutting around decal borders that way, with the white decal cut slightly smaller than the desired size and the clear decal version cut slightly larger for good, sharp decal borders. This is what the aircraft looked like in 1995 with the original camouflage. The red spinner caps and red outline around the Staffel letter indicate the Staffel. This is what the model looked like in 2022 after I repainted it and replaced all of the upper surface decals. The S9 code indicates the Geschwader. The E with white surround identifies the Staffel. K is the aircraft letter. These codes can be looked up. Here's an example. Note the Geschwader code was reduced in size for late war Zerstorers. I think in 1994 I chose to model this Tamiya Spitfire Mark I from 92 Squadron solely because it was a high-scoring British squadron during the Battle of Britain. I only had a photo from an Alfred Price book showing the back portion of the port side of the aircraft. No information on the starboard side. I made the aircraft letter P under the chin by cutting up and piecing together parts of spare decals, something I often did, to get the correct serial number or aircraft letter. I'm not sure about the camouflage colors. I'd like the brown to be the color shown in the restored aircraft photo, but I suspect Middlestone looked more like the darker color in this photo. I don't think this photo is colorized. Even with my model, the color seems to vary quite a bit in different light conditions. I noticed some modelers seem to wing it with weathering, and I wanted to be more authentic, so I've collected some images of real aircraft undersides. Modelers often seem to have too much cordite stain around the guns and too little around the cartridge eject chutes. Here's a hard-to-see view of oil stains on my model. This is a Mach-E 202 Folgore. This was a Toro kit, an Italian company. It was a strange kit with wide panel lines, no alignment pins to hold fuselage halves together, and it was sometimes difficult to tell the flange from the actual part. One good thing, though, was the thin trailing edges. Not knowing much about Italian aircraft, I used a black and white photograph from the kit instructions of a 352 Squadriglia MC202. I used a kit-provided camouflage pattern that turned out to be for an aircraft based in Russia. The black cat symbol indicates 20 Gruppo. The tan North African camouflage color is interesting, as 20 Gruppo is reported to have flown Mach-E's out of Sicily, Sardinia, and the Italian mainland. This is a later aircraft, as by 1942 the white center fasces had been changed to allow the background to show through, and the German white fuselage band had been adopted by the Italians. After 25 years, some yellowing is visible on the clear portion of the Gruppo decal. I'd like to add some stains to the underside of this aircraft if I can determine what they should look like. This is a Hasegawa kit for a Messerschmitt BF 109 F4, one of the last variants flown by Joachim Marseille. I couldn't originally find a one Gruppo JG27 emblem, so I made one with Adobe Illustrator, printed to regular paper, and glued them to my model. The resolution was poor and the paper thick, so I replaced the decals with waterslide decals I made from a photo using the GIMP photo editing tool. I found two emblem examples and merged the best parts of each into a single emblem for this model. Here are the emblems for each of the fighter Geschwaders. There was a period in 1943 and 44 where neither these emblems nor Defense of the Reich tailbands were on the aircraft of many Geschwaders, making Geschwader ID difficult, if not impossible. As time progressed in 1941 and 42, the tan on the fuselage sides of North African aircraft progressed further down the sides. Presumably, this gave better camouflage protection on the ground. This model's aircraft number and fuselage cross were replaced to match a photo of one of Marseille's aircraft, hopefully the right one. German insignia evolved during the war. The decals on the tail were replaced with waterslide decals I made. This late-war Marseille aircraft was flown around September of 1942. This is a Fujimi model of Klaus Maedisches Messerschmitt BF 109 G6. This is a Stab aircraft. My Yiddish was the longtime three-gruppe Kommandeur since June of 1943. The only changes I made were to the aircraft number to make it slightly smaller. Here's a photo of my Yiddish taking off compared to my model. This is a monogram kit for Hub Zemke's Republic P-47 C5. Most P-47s had white theater band markings on the cowl and the vertical and horizontal stabilizers only, not on the wing roots. Here's a picture of Colonel Zemke, CO of the 56 Fighter Group, standing on the wing of his highly waxed aircraft. Zemke worked for Curtiss training Soviet pilots in 1941 and learned some Russian. That's the Curtiss propeller logo on the cowl. I replaced the yellow decals because I thought they were too transparent, and I made them more orange yellow. Unfortunately, with my custom decals, light colored decals are a problem because they need to be printed on white decal paper and then cut close to the white border, as there's no clear border. I tried to match the olive drab border color on the decal with the model, but since it's not an exact match, I hand-painted part of the decal. The added paint doesn't seem noticeable. Here's an image showing U.S. insignia evolution. Zemke's P-47 went from a simple roundel with a yellow border to the red outlined U.S. emblem with wings. The insignia type can be used to help date an aircraft photo. The 56th and the 4th Fighter Groups used a unique enlarged insignia under both wings. Here are some P-47 weathering examples, which I tried to replicate. The kit was for a D-25 model, so I modified it to look like a C-5 by removing some cowl flaps and making the spinner hub more pointed. Nearly all P-47s were Razorbacks prior to D-Day. The 56 only had 3 bubble-top P-47s with the extra 65 gallons of internal fuel. Zemke flew this aircraft from May to October of 1943 and had 10 credited victories with it. Live Bait is a P-51B-1 flown by Clayton Kelly Gross of the 354th Fighter Group, 9th Air Force. This is a Tamiya model. The 354th was the first group to get P-51B Mustangs, and they were on loan to provide escort for 8th Air Force bombers. Here's Kelly Gross. I replaced the scoreboard with a larger one, but didn't realize the incompatibility between the number of victories on the scoreboard and the aircraft markings. The aircraft lost its nose and tail bands and gained D-Day stripes before the 14th of June, 1944, when Gross had 4 aerial and 2 ground victories. While stationed at Boxstead, it looked as modeled, but with only 2 victories and no fuselage fuel cap, as it was a B-1. The starboard side probably should contain the name of the first assigned pilot's wife, Peggy, along with his 8 recorded mission symbols, which are shown on the port side, but not sure if they were white or yellow. In December of 1943, all P-51Bs had white theater band markings on the vertical and horizontal stabilizers, along with the wing roots and the fuselage band/spinner. As the war progressed, some stripes were removed from the vertical stabilizers by April of 1944. Then the white was removed from the front of the P-51 fuselages. This is another good way to date aircraft photos. When the olive drab camouflage was replaced by natural metal, the white European theater markings were replaced with black at the European depots, starting around April of 1944. In his book, then-Lieutenant Gross claims a few weeks after the 4th of February 1944, he was coming back from a mission with Captain Bob Stevens as an element, and Bob suggested, "Why don't I drop back and get a little above you? Maybe you'll get bounced and we'll see a little action." Kelly responded, "Hey, what do you think I am, live bait?" And he then had that name applied to his aircraft. This is Francis Gabreski's P-47 D-25. This was a tester's kit. The 56th Fighter Group was probably the first to begin painting a unique squadron color on their aircraft around March of 1944. The 8th Air Force standardized this with a unique fuselage noseband color and pattern for an entire group. Some groups customized the spinner/noseband in a unique squadron color. In the fall of 1944, 8th Air Force groups began also painting their rudders in a unique squadron color. 9th Air Force P-51 groups did something sort of similar, although originally with more noseband pattern variation within the groups. Here's a comparison of a real photograph of Gabreski's aircraft and my model. Gabreski flew this aircraft from May to July of 1944 until he crashed it and became a POW. The bomb cart and the 5 figures with leather jackets and green pants came from a monogram B-17G kit. Here's a rare instance when I put a propeller on an aircraft. It doesn't look bad. I like the tread on the wheels too. I needed a high-resolution decal for Gabreski's scoreboard to show the aircraft names above each flag, and to show flag details. Here's the scoreboard decal I made. I thought the names might be Photoshopped for a book cover, but in the armorer's photo below, the aircraft names can actually be seen above the flags. This updated decal shows the correct names of the pilot and crew. Zooming in, the 600 dot per inch decal does have enough resolution so that the aircraft names are visible. The cover of Gabreski's book also shows thin black stripes added around the D-Day bands, possibly to cover the shoddy work done hastily in the middle of the night before D-Day. However, the crashed aircraft has solid black D-Day bands. Not sure if the book cover is wrong or if the solid black bands were painted in later. Here's George Preddy's North American P-51 D5 Mustang. The Tamiya kit was for a P-51 D10 or later, so I modified it to remove the dorsal fin. George liked to yell "Cripes a-mighty" when he played craps. The original decals were a mix of modified Aeromaster decals, which seemed too big, and modified kit decals, which seemed too narrow and the wrong shape for the aircraft letter on the tail. I replaced them recently with decals I made myself to try to get the correct thickness. When I originally applied the canopy decal, the middle initial in George's name folded under, so I replaced it with a decal I made. Looking inside the canopy, the battery in the back is visible with a radio receiver transmitter in front of it. I like this Tamiya kit. The flaps, panel lines, and rivets look good to me. I think this rudder looks better than the Tamiya P-51B, which has some strange bends in the leading edge. George started flying this aircraft after D-Day around the 29th of June, when it still had full D-Day stripes and 17 crosses. All Allied aircraft were painted with full black and white D-Day stripes the night before D-Day. By July, the stripes had been removed from the upper surfaces of U.S. aircraft. They began disappearing completely from U.S. aircraft in the fall of 1944. From the book Top Mustang Ace, the 31 victory markings date this model to the period after 6 August 1944 until George stopped flying it in mid-August. George was credited with 1 ground victory and, per U.S. Air Force Study 85, 11.5 aerial victories with this aircraft. These 2 of 6 figures came from a Hasegawa pilot kit. Here are some spare parts: a 40mm Hurricane Mark IID tank buster cannon, U.S. bombs 250, 500, 1,000, and 2,000 pounds, a 75-gallon U.S. metal drop tank, a 108-gallon British paper drop tank, and in the background is an external tank for a Spitfire. This is the model with the propeller blurred. There's the 4 30mm nose cannons. Me-262s didn't get R4M rockets until the end of the war, around March of 1945. The R4Ms are shown with both open and closed fins. Here are WGR-21 rockets that were under the wings of various aircraft in 1943, including BF-110s, 109s, and FW-190As. The rocket is shown both inside the launch tube and alongside of it. And finally, yet another Dragon kit for a Focke-Wulf 190D9. I like this kit too. I like the metal parts, although this one has plastic tires. The exhaust manifolds show this is a liquid-cooled engine instead of the 190A air-cooled engine. The aircraft looks huge compared to the figure. This was a Stab aircraft based on a photograph of a captured aircraft. It has the JG-26 Defense of the Reich fuselage band. Here's the captured aircraft on top and a reference photo showing colors below. It was not uncommon at the end of the war to overspray aircraft in green for added ground camouflage, and that was done to the tailband of this aircraft. In JG-26 War Diary, Unteroffizier Heinz Gehrke claims, quote, "Markings changes were ordered in late June for all fighters in France. Removal of the yellow paint on all the undercowl and rudder, which had been theater markings since 1941, and repainting of the black-green spinner in black with a white spiral." There's also an earlier Ultra-intercepted message from the German C&C dated 10 February 1944, stating among other things that aircraft shall have spiral spinners. It also mentions Defense of the Reich fuselage bands and white tails for Defense of the Reich Geschwader and Gruppe commanders. This photo of a JG-27-109 with a green tail band was dated by Caldwell early 1944. In addition to the tail band, this aircraft also has a One-Gruppe emblem to indicate the Geschwader. Some of the first Defense of the Reich tail bands were a rust red color and were used by multiple Geschwaders. Photos of JG-26 aircraft with tailbands didn't start showing up until November of 1944. By then, tailbands were a unique pattern for each Geschwader. Relative to the long-nosed 190s, JG-26 began training and had their first combats with them in December 1944. The larger 50 caliber equivalent machine guns above the engines are a distinguishing feature. I like the way the Photoshop propeller turned out in this photo of my model. That's what I've been up to. Thanks for watching.